easily a top 3 quarterback in the league, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So, all right, let's go to the next team, the team that actually knocked them out, like I mentioned last year. LA Rams, they went through a little bit of a transformation themselves. So in terms of additions, obviously the big one, adding Matthew Stafford via trade, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second, and then wide receiver Deshaun Jackson, and then draft wise, like I mentioned, I believe it was 3 first round picks they attached with Goff, right, for Stafford. I think
2 or 3.
2 or 3, I forget. Regardless, didn't have the first round pick, but did have a second round pick, which they use on wide receiver Tutu Atwell out of Louisville, who I thought was a solid receiver coming out. But yeah, in terms of losses, like I mentioned, Jared Goff gone to Detroit. Michael Brockers, which I don't know if you remember, that was real funny. That how he was, I forgot what he said, but basically he was really high on Stafford over Goff, and then they traded him to Detroit. So he's stuck with Goff again, so that must be weird. Lost center Austin Blythe, cornerback Troy Hill, running back Malcolm Brown, tight end Gerald Everett, who just, and then safety John Johnson, who I think we both feel it's an underrated loss there. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds, and outside linebacker Samson Ebicam. So I'll throw this to you, John. With the basically the swap of Stafford and Goff, do you think the Rams can finally get back into the Super Bowl like they did a couple years ago?
So here, I mean, like I said, this division is really hard. So what I'm not going to look for things that I think are positives. I'm going to look for reasons to doubt them.
Okay.
And for the Rams, yes, they added Stafford, but I think that puts increased pressure on both Stafford and McVay because with Goff, the bar was set at losing the Super Bowl, which means the only way that Stafford and McVay can live up to expectations, in my opinion, is winning the Super Bowl. Because if Goff got you there, obviously a Todd Gurley and some of these different things, but if Goff and all his limitations was able to get there, I think that Matthew Stafford and the quarterback that people expect him to be and the talent that he is, the bar, in my opinion, should be they have to win the Super Bowl. And I don't think they will, just for starters. I don't necessarily consider them like a top tier Super Bowl contender. I think they could be, but I have to see what happens. I'm not putting them above the Buccaneers or the Packers or certain other teams in the NFC. And yeah, I think the defensive losses I think they're bigger than a lot of people are realizing. You're smiling, so I'm assuming somebody's talking in the chat.
Mike said you're.
What did he say?
He said you're.
I was he literally just said you're.
I pinned it there. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Anyway, they lost their defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, and they brought in a guy who that we both like, Raheem Morris. But I do think that a change is always tough on a defense. They lost John Johnson, like you said. I think that's an underrated loss. They lost Michael Brockers, who gave them, really solid reps at the D-line spots.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once again, this division's tough. I think they should win it, and I'm gonna pick them to win it. But I'm really skeptical, just because of all the changes that I mentioned. And they did have a down year last year, and they have. I mean, not a down year. They actually exceeded expectations last year.
I didn't have them making the playoffs, I don't think.
Yeah, but the year before they had a down year. And offensively, I would say last year wasn't amazing. I think they were carried by their defense for the most part. The dominance of Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and the schemes that Brandon Staley was able to come up with were really impressive and landed him the head coach job. But offensively, I think they have regressed over since that Super Bowl run. And I'm just starting to wonder that. And I love Sean McVay. Don't get me wrong. I think he's one of the best young coaches, but I think questions in my mind are starting to arise about him. Is he on the same level with LaFleur, with Shanahan, the guys who he is always going to be compared with because of where they all came from together? With LaFleur, he went from Tennessee, he became the coach of the Packers, and they've gotten better. Like Aaron Rodgers just won MVP, right? With the Shanahan, I mean, it's Kyle Shanahan, right? Like the guy makes everything. And so McVay, I think this is a prove it year. Not that he's on the hot seat or anything, but With Matthew Stafford, I think there are no more excuses that you can make because I think unfairly Jared Goff was the scapegoat. I think Jared Goff was limited, and I don't think he's an amazing quarterback, but I think that McVay kind of threw all the blame on him when maybe his offensive schemes just aren't fooling as many people as they used to be. So yeah, like I said, I think they should win the division, but I still am a skeptic a little bit.
All right. So I'm a little bit more on McVay's side in terms of the Goff situation. Granted, McVay
Which I
had
am
to
too, by
reinvent
the way.
himself. Yeah.
Just real quick, I am too. I think the Matthew Stafford trade was absolutely the right thing because limited quarterbacks, it's hard to win.
And
That being said, I do think McVay played a part in the decline because you can't just purely put it on Goff.
and it didn't help that and once again, you and I don't know, and I'm not sure the public knows, but I would really love to know, was he a driving force for approving the contract that they gave Goff? Because I remember even when he got signed, I was like, that's no, Jared Goff is not.
And Todd Gurley,
It's not
by the
that.
way, like they both got paid.
Todd Gurley, I don't really blame them because the knee thing came up out of, what I mean? He was the top running back in football.
It's
Their
true.
system was basically relying on Todd Gurley, as we saw, because once he went down, it was, it took them, they had to get back on track.
Which that's where my questions arise too, though, is the Shanahans, LaFleur, even with AJ Dillon and Jamal Williams, like they don't struggle with other running backs.
Yeah.
But McVay hasn't had the same success without Todd Gurley.
Well, and that's why it sucks too. They got Cam Akers. I think he came on at the end of last year, and that's why they felt comfortable probably to let Malcolm Brown walk. They still had Dale Henderson behind him, but now Cam Akers out for the season. I think Darrell Henderson is obviously not as good as Cam Akers, but I think he can be solid enough to do the things that that McVay wants. Maybe just not to the level that Akers would, but I think this will be definitely a competitive team. I'm interested to see what Raheem Morris does with the defense. If it will be, obviously I think this was the number one defense last year, so it's going to be tough to stay at that level, especially with all their losses. But if they can still be a top 10 defense, and as long as Matthew Stafford, finally shows, I think he'll finally show his true talents, because it was hard to recognize him in Detroit. A bad system, never really had a run game, and now he has a good system with dependable wide receivers and a solid run game and a solid defense. Something things he never had in Detroit. Now, and I think he can handle the pressure, because he had the pressure of carrying Detroit all this time, and now he's probably sitting here going, man, like I don't have to be be balling at 110% for us to win every game. I can afford to have a 90, 80% game, and we might probably still win because I have a team around me. Granted, though, yeah, I'm a little worried about maybe their O-line. Like I mentioned, they lost Austin Blythe. They've been losing some linemen. Whitworth's getting up there in age, but I'm trusting in that. McVay and the front office, they have guys coming up that they can depend on. So, if I had a prediction, I think this is going to be one of those teams fighting for the wild card spot. But I wouldn't be shocked if they won the division. But it just depends on, like we alluded to, what happens in Seattle and some of these other teams too. But yeah, this is a difficult division to evaluate, just because I think we both think it's going to be a very competitive one, even more so than last year.
I could realistically see any of these teams actually winning the division if they take jumps that they are capable of taking.
Yeah. All right. So